This call is now being recorded.
Let me now first explain the topics which have been asked by a few learners yesterday. Then we will discuss about certain other issues relating to the economic environment of the business. So the first question, am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
good. So
Yes, sir.
one question that was asked by one of the learners yesterday about Arbitration Act. Arbitration Act, in your study material, Arbitration Act of 1940 is there. So here it is important to know what is the meaning of arbitration. So actually arbitration means it is the process of bringing a business dispute before a third party. Third party means a party who is impartial, who is not interested in the dispute, but he must have some expertise in finding out a solution to the dispute. So such a person or such an individual will be accepted as an arbitrator by the disputing parties. Disputing parties means, suppose, I will explain it with the help of an example so that it will be clearly and it can be understood properly. So arbitration means the process of bringing business dispute before a third party for resolution or for finding out a solution or for resolution of the dispute. So the party, what they will do, they will select an individual or a group of individuals as arbitrator. Those people, the third party who will be appointed for finding out a solution through mutual negotiation among the disputing parties, that party will be known as, that third person will be known as arbitrator. So arbitrator need not necessarily be only one individual. It may be a panel of individuals. More than one person may also be appointed as arbitrators. So the disputing parties will present the dispute with evidences and arguments before the arbitrators. The arbitrators will examine those evidences and the arguments. They will hear the arguments presented before them by both the disputing parties, and thereafter they will make a decision. Thereafter, on the basis of the arguments presented by before the arbitrator or arbitrators, and with the help of the evidences presented before them, the arbitrators will arrive at a decision. So this is known as arbitration. And what are the duties and responsibilities of the arbitrators? What are the other provisions of the Arbitration Act? That is, what are the broad framework of rules and regulations that has to be followed in the process of arbitration? Those are enshrined in the Arbitration Act of 1940. So it is to be noted here that the arbitration the arbitrators, they don't have to be lawyers, isn't it? They don't have to be lawyers, but arbitrators must be such a person who has some expertise in a particular area of knowledge. For example, suppose two individuals, they are coming before the arbitrator for a divorce, isn't it? So in this case, both the parties will present their arguments and evidences before the arbitrator. The arbitrator will hear those arguments. The arbitrator will examine all the evidences presented to him or to them, and on the basis of the arguments and evidences, he will give a judgment or he will give a solution, and that solution is supposed to be accepted by both the disputing parties. So, so to say, it is a kind of conciliation arrangement. Conciliation arrangement means the process of arriving at a solution beyond the court of law. But even when the disputes are being resolved through arbitration, there must be some rules and regulations which must be followed, and these rules and regulations are contained in the Arbitration Act of 1940. So the disputing parties, they will agree that one or several individuals, they can make a decision about the dispute after after examining the evidences and after examining the evidences and hearing the arguments. So remember one thing, that the arbitrators don't have to be lawyers. There is no provision that only lawyers can become arbitrators. Arbitrators don't have to be the lawyers. Even a person who is impartial in nature and who is respectable and who is acceptable to both the disputing parties, such a person should be appointed as the arbitrator. But he should have some knowledge and expertise in the concerned subject, concerned area of knowledge or concerned area of study. So this is about arbitration. Then the other question, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Then one more question was there with regard to dimensions of social responsibilities of business. So I have already told you certain important aspects about social responsibility of business, and in order to understand the different dimensions of social responsibilities of business, you have to know why a business enterprise should be socially responsible first. Can you tell me? Yes.
Hello, sir. Cannot hear you.
Someone was asking yesterday about the different dimensions of social responsibility of business. So I am asking you a question because we have already discussed about social responsibility of business in detail in our first class. I want to know from you, after all, why a business enterprise should be socially responsible. And also I have told about,
Sir, we should be socially responsible towards the different, like, towards the environment, towards the government. So, like, every business enterprise should be responsible for whatever task it is carrying out. It should be within the social foundations. Like, um, it should be fair with the environment, and it should be fair with the, or it should go with the regulatory rules of the government, and
it should be responsible to the different
yeah, it should
segments
be
of the
responsible.
society,
Yeah.
different stakeholders of the society. But why? A business entity is basically a business organization. Its aim is to make profit. But why should a business entity should spend a part of its profit for non-profit activities? Did
So
you?
that the overall development of the society happens. I mean, if we, I mean, we cannot disturb one aspect and then move on with the other aspects of life. So for the overall development of the society.
Yes, yes. That means, after all, it is essential on the part of every business organization to be accountable to the society, because where do they exist? Where do a business enterprise exist? Where does it take its birth? In the society. A business enterprise takes its birth in the society. It exists in the society. It grows and prospers in the society. That is why, and it makes use of the societal resources. That's why it should be accountable to the society. Without society, the business entity's existence will be in danger. It will be in jeopardy. So that's why a business entity should be responsible to the different segments of the society. So, dimensions of social responsibilities of business means, who are the different components or elements of the society, what is their expectations from the business, and how the business entity should be responsible to them. Dimensions of business enterprise means, who are the different elements of the society who have certain expectations from the business entity, and how the business entity should be fulfilling those expectations. So that is dimensions of social responsibilities of business. So let me precisely tell you the different components of the society and their expectations, and how the business, what the business entity should do. Let us, as someone was telling just now, that one such segment is government. What is the expectation of the government from a business? The government wants that the business entity should pay taxes to the government promptly, honestly. The government should the business entity should not do anything which will harm the ecosystem of the area where it is carrying on its activity. It must maintain proper environmental norms. It must obey all environmental norms prescribed by the government. It must not indiscriminately use the natural resources. The business entity must not make indiscriminate use of the natural resources, because natural resources are scarce, they are limited. A time will come when all the natural resources will be exhausted. So that's why they must be properly utilized. And the business entity cannot afford to use them indiscriminately. Then the government's expectation is that the business entity should provide employment opportunities to it should create employment opportunities. It should create employment opportunities. So these are the different expectations of the government as one of the elements of the society, and the business entity must conform or must carry out its activities in a manner which will facilitate the fulfillment of all these expectations of the government. Is that clear to all of you? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Then what is the expectation of the employees?
The timely payment of salary and environment where they can work with friendly environment.
Conducive working environment. Then basic facilities, healthcare facilities, education facilities for them and for their family members. Then the business entity must ensure job security. It must ensure a very reasonable and rational compensation mechanism should be there. They must be decently and reasonably paid, and the business enterprise also provide sufficient scope for the professional growth of the employees. So these are the expectation of an employee from the business, and business must must cater to the requirements of the employees. Similarly, there are different other expectations also which you can write. There are some employees, they want recognition for their sincerity, for their commitment to the organization. They, even if you pay them as per the norms, but still they don't feel happy. Their efforts need to be recognized. So they need recognition for their sincerity, dedication, commitment, hard work. So that is the expectation of the employees. Then as a customer, what will be the expectation of a customer from the business?
They are getting quality product with reasonable price.
Quality products at a price which is within the financial reach of the customers, and the product must be of appropriate quality. It must be made available to the customers in proper shape, size, form. Then it must be made available to him at the right place and in right time, in right quantity and quality.
And post service facilities.
Yes, post-sale service facility must be provided to the customers. So in this way, the different elements of the society have different expectations, which we have already discussed at length in, if I remember correctly, in our first class. Similarly, you can write the other points also. For example, investors. What is the expectation of the investor? Safety of his fund, profitability from his fund, and liquidity of his fund. So the investor should be assured of this fact. Then what is the expectation of the creditors or the suppliers? Creditors, their due must be paid to them in right time. Then the suppliers' expectation is the price of the raw materials which have been supplied from them must be paid to them in right time. The business entity, being a creditor, must abide by the terms and conditions of the credit honestly and sincerely. These are the expectations of an creditor from the business. And they are also interested in their credit score. They are also interested in entering into trust with the partner.
Sir, you are not audible.
They want that. I am not audible?
Sir, now you are clear. Pale-
Yes. So, that I was talking to you regarding the responsibility of the business towards the creditors. Then what is the responsibility of the business towards the community at large? Who can say? Yes. What is the responsibility of the business towards the community at large? You see,
Sir, the
right?
Yes. So the socially responsible firms or the socially responsible firms actually are environmental friendly. They conserve the natural resources and pollution control also they have. In fact, rural development also. So in all these, having all these, they create a good name for their brand.
Goodwill for the farm.
Yeah, goodwill for the brand.
Yes. The most important thing that the business entity should do for the community is it must have a very effective means of communication. It must have a very sound channel of communication with the community at large. That means the community should feel the existence of the business farm. And all the activities of the business enterprise must be carried out in a very transparent manner. There should not be any ambiguity in their activities and performance. And there must be a very effective means of communication between the business entity and the community at large. Then, as she was saying, it should take proper care of the environment. It should spend some amount for social forestation or plantation, drinking water facility for the people, then lighting facility. You must be knowing that MCL is spending a substantial amount of its profit for lighting of the Bodadanda at Puri. Lighting. of Bodadanda at Puri. Similarly, Nalco is spending a substantial amount of its profit for plantation. So in this way, all the business enterprises, they must maintain a very effective channel of communication. They should take care of the environment. They must spend some amount of their profit in in providing healthcare facilities to the community, drinking water facilities, then proper road transport and communication, and as a part of their CSR activities. Similarly, they must involve themselves in different socially useful activities like your awareness program, then vaccination program, then they must take part in organizing healthcare camps, health camps. So in this way, there must be a proper relationship that should exist between the community and the business entity. Then only the business entity will be able to enhance its reputation and goodwill in the market, and it will be easier for the firm. That means it should do everything to win the confidence of the community, people in the surroundings. Then only it can grow and prosper properly. Yes. Trade union. Trade union are also another stakeholders. What is the responsibility of the business towards the trade unions? Should they be put down? Should they discourage the formation of trade unions in their enterprise? What is your opinion? You see, these are the things which are there in the text in your book. But in such, if at all any questions from this topic like this comes, you should be able to form your own independent opinion. You should be able to give some contemporary examples so that your answer will be different from, it will have some element of originality and it will impress the examiner. So, can you tell me what is the expectation of, or what is the responsibility of the business towards the trade unions? Why trade unions should be there? Actually, trade unions are working for protecting the interest of the laborers, isn't it? Workers. And the success of a business enterprise depends on the healthy relationship that exists between the workers and the management. The workers, the management must feel that whatever achievement and prosperity the business enterprise has been able to achieve is due to the contribution made by the workers. It is the outcome of their hard labor. So that is why they must understand the importance of the workers, and on the other hand, the workers should also feel that their prosperity lies in the prosperity of the organization where they are working. Then only there will be a proper understanding between a proper communication or understanding between the workers and the management, and on the basis of the healthy relationship that exists between these two important components like your workers and management, the business enterprise will grow, and also it will lead to satisfaction and growth, improvement in the standard of living of the workers. And ultimately, it will also contribute to the growth, healthy growth of the economy, healthy growth of the society. Then, that is the expectation of the trade unions. And always, you see, there are many things which are not there in the text. You have to find it out and incorporate it in your answer. There are many, you see, many the problems are there which cannot be sorted out through a formal structure, can be solved very quickly if in a very informal atmosphere. So that's why the personal rapport or the personal relationship that exists between the workers and the management sometimes play a very important role in the growth of an enterprise, prosperity of the enterprise as well as the prosperity of the employees thereof. Yes, here let me give you an example which is not directly connected, of course. You must be knowing the Ford Motors, General Motors. General Motors, who is the founder of General Motors Company? Can you tell me? Can any one of you tell me? General Motors, who is the founder of the General Motors of USA? Yes. Surabhi, Mathur, can you tell me? Are you hearing me?
No, sir. I am not aware.
Komal? Who can say?
No, no, sir.
Have you heard the name of General Motors Company?
Sir, something William.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
William.
So something.
William D.
No.
William C. Durant. I just googled it.
No. The founder of General Motors Company is Henry Ford. Henry Ford. Do you know that where the General Motors Company is situated? The main corporate office of the General Motors Company is situated in Detroit. Detroit is a city of the United States of America which is known for the existence of the General Motors Company. Isn't it? And Henry Ford is the founder of that General Motors Company. And also, let me tell you that General Motors Company was established in Detroit. How it came into existence there? Everybody should know. Of course, as a student of commerce, you should know it. But it is a general knowledge question that the Detroit city is the place where the General Motors Company, the corporate office or the main corporate office of the General Motors Company is situated or located. So it was a very small village. Nobody was knowing that a village called Detroit was existing. So Henry Ford, he decided that he would set up his motor company, General Motors Company, in his own native village. Thereafter, the General Motors Company became world famous. And now everybody knows what for Detroit is famous in the world. Similarly, in Gujarat, there is a place called Sanand, not Anand, Sanand. In Gujarat, there is a place called Sanand. Do you know why Sanand is famous? Initially, the Nano car of Tata Motors was proposed to be established in Singur of West Bengal. But the then West Bengal government didn't allow the project to be set up there. At that time, the then Gujarat government, they invited Tata Group of Company, Tata Motors, to set up the Nano car factory at Sanand. And now it has become very famous, not only after the after the setting up of that Nano car factory in Sanand of Gujarat, all other companies, all other car manufacturers, they also started setting up their plants in Sanand, like your Hyundai, then Volkswagen, then all other car manufacturers, they have also started setting up their plants, car plants, manufacturing plants in Sanand. So in this way, that means there are many factors which influences the growth and prosperity of an enterprise and the stakeholders who are interested in the affairs of a company. So these are certain political issues or certain economic, personal issues. That was a personal desire of Henry Ford that the motor company should be set up at Detroit. So in India also, the corporate organizations, they are playing a very important role in discharging social responsibility as a part of their social responsibility. So when a company is investing a part of its profit in CSR activities, that means it is a process of sharing the wealth with the society, the wealth which they have earned by using the resources of the society. It is a mechanism to repay or share a part of the profit which they have earned by using the resources of the society. So that is the basic philosophy lying behind corporate social responsibility. And when you are answering the question regarding the social dimensions of the business, you not only you have to write the contents which are there in your study material, but sometimes you have to substantiate your answer with the help of some contemporary examples. Let me give you some example. And I was talking to you that day. Tata Group of Industries. Tata Group of Industries, you might have heard the name of some world-class institutions like your TIFR. What is the full form of TIFR? Yes, any one of you who can say? You should take part in the discussion. It is a kind of one-way communication. Simply I am telling, you are listening, you are not participating in the discussion. It should be a communication both from you as well as from me. It should not be one-sided. Yes, what do you mean by TIFR? What is the full form of TIFR? there is a segment in your book, in your study material on business environment, and that topic is social responsibility of business in the Indian context. So you can give this example, which I am going to give you. Yes, there are some institutions I am telling you, you note it down. You note it down, it is not there in your study material. I am giving you a few examples of social responsibility, how business houses discharging their social responsibility in Indian context. In Indian context. TIFR, I was telling you, TIFR stands for Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. It is a world-class research institute in basic sciences like your physics, chemistry, mathematics, bioscience, etc.
The
Engineering,
Data Institute of
fundamental research. Similarly, there is another institute called TISS, TISS. TISS stands for TIFR is a world-class research institute in basic sciences. TISS is a world-class research institute in social sciences. And TISS stands for Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Tata Institute of Social Sciences. It carries on, it is an institution dedicated for carrying on very good quality research work in the field of social sciences, like your human resource management, then industrial relation, then political sciences, economics, history, etc. Similarly, you must have heard the name of IISC. IISC, Indian Institute of Science. Where it is located? Bombay.
Bangalore.
Sorry, Bangalore.
Yeah.
TISS is located at Bombay. TIFR is located at Bombay. Main campus. Main campus of TIFR is situated in Mumbai. Main campus of TISS is situated in Mumbai. And
So what
Indian
is the full form of this?
Tata Institute of Social Sciences.
Oh, so it is DISS.
T.
Yeah. Okay,
Tata
okay, sir.
Institute of Social Sciences. Similarly, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Then there is one more institute that is, all of you must be knowing, Tata Memorial Hospital. Tata Memorial Hospital, it is situated in Mumbai. Then one more institute is there, NIPM. NIPM, National Institute of Performing Arts. National Institute of Performing Arts. So these are very reputed institutions, world-class institutions. And do you know that all these institutions, how these institutions are managed? These institutions are managed by trusts. And in all these trusts, 65% of the shares, what percentage of shares? 65, more than 50%. 65% of the shares are held by Tata Group of Industries. That means Tata is investing a substantial amount of its profit in CSR activities, corporate social responsibility activities. And that is why you for example, all the companies, leading companies in the world are ranked by different institutions, different ranking organizations, like your Times, Forbes magazine. They rank which are the richest companies in the world. You will never find the name of Tata Group of Industries as richest company, because they spend quite a substantial amount of their profit in CSR activities. That's why they may not be finding a place in the list of richest company, but their contribution to socially responsible activities, socially useful activities is substantial. That you must know as a student of business environment. Similarly, uh, I will give you one more example. You must have heard the name of SAIL, SAIL. SAIL, it is a public sector
Yes, sir.
organization in the steel sector, leading public sector company in the steel, iron and steel sector, SAIL, Steel Authority of India Limited. Similarly, in the field of thermal energy, NTPC, you must have heard the name. It is also a public sector undertaking.
Yes, sir.
National Thermal Power Corporation. So these two leading public sector companies, they are using huge quantity of natural resources. Which companies? SAIL and NTPC. NTPC uses coal in order to generate electricity. Coal is converted to heat energy, and heat energy is converted to electricity energy. Similarly, SAIL is a steel manufacturing company, leading public sector organization in iron and steel sector, and it makes use of huge quantity of natural resources in the form of iron ore and coal. Iron ore and coal. Similarly, NTPC is using huge amount of natural resources in the form of coal. And take another example. And just we will it was a news report I am sharing with you. It was a news report. There must be quite a good number of people who have been employed in SAIL and NTPC. They must be contributing huge amount of revenue to the government by way of dividend, because they are public sector companies. They are helping the government by in generating revenue. They are providing employment opportunities to people. So their importance in the economy is very significant, very important. Take another company. You must have heard the name of TCS.
Yes, sir. Tata Consultancy Services.
Yes, Tata Consultancy Services.
Tata Consultancy Services. What kind of raw material it uses? Does it use coal?
Sir, human resources.
I am asking you, does it use coal?
No, sir.
Does it use iron ore or any other kind of natural resources? No.
No, sir.
It makes use of very least amount of natural resources. Suppose a corporate office will be situated, a building, office building will be constructed. So it must make use of certain space. But it uses least amount of natural resources. And it provides employment opportunities to the number of people, which is number of young people in the country, which is much more than the total number of people who have been employed combinedly in NTPC and SEL. Did you understand my point? That means the total number of people who have been employed in TCS is much more than the total number of people combinedly employed in SEL and NTPC. Similarly, in terms of revenue contribution to the government, the contribution made by the TCS is much more than the combined contribution of revenue to the government by NTPC and SEL. But the amount of natural resources which are being used by NTPC and SEL is much higher than the amount of natural resources which is being used by TCS. It is almost using very insignificant amount of natural resources. And TCS is also, as a part of, you must have visited some TCS offices. They are maintaining their premises very beautifully. They spend quite a good amount of their profit for beautification of their premises, plantation, then all other recycling of the wastewater, then other very they are spending quite a good amount of money for beautification and development of their campus offices. So in this way, the societal contribution, why they are spending, why TCS, why Tata Group of Industry is spending huge amount of money. So this time you might have heard that Azim Premji of Wipro, it has contributed 50 crore rupees. $50 crore or 50,000 crore to the Prime Minister PM Care Fund, COVID Care Fund. It is a very significant amount. Why they are spending, why they are giving huge contribution? Because it is a part of their responsibility. Corporate, they are spending such amount of money as a part of their CSR activity. So previously, it was not mandatory. It was optional. But nowadays, it has become legally mandatory. It has become a statutory responsibility. So it has been specified it has been prescribed in the Indian Companies Act of 2013 that every company will have to spend a 2%, at least 2% of their net profit in CSR activities. So these are the different issues that you should discuss. Who are the stakeholders? Why this business should be engaging themselves in socially responsible activities? Then who are the stakeholders? What are their expectations? And how the business entity should be socially responsible to them? What it should do to them to fulfill their expectations? So that is how you can explain social dimensions of business. Then yes, one more question was there. Monetary policy and fiscal policy. Monetary policy and fiscal policy. Someone was asking me this question: what is the meaning of monetary policy and fiscal policy? Monetary policy is the policy that is associated with the control of money supply in the economy. That means the money supply in the economy must be controlled. By whom it will be controlled? It will be controlled by the central bank of the country. Which is the Central Bank of India?
RBI.
Reserve Bank of India. Similarly, can you tell me the name of the Central Bank of UK? Bank of England. Central Bank of USA. Central Bank of USA is known as, have you, I think there is a paper in your IBO, International Financial System is there. Is it there or not?
Yes, sir.
You should know the Central Bank of USA is known as the Federal Reserve System. The Central Bank of England is known as the Bank of England. Central Bank of France is known as the Bank of France. Similarly, the Central Bank of Germany is known as the Rick Bank of Germany. Rick Bank of Germany. And the Central Bank of India is known as the Reserve Bank of India. So, who formulates the monetary policy of a country? The monetary policy of a country is formulated by the Central Bank or the Reserve Bank of India in our country. And it is monetary policy is devised by the Central Bank of the country, and in our country it is the Reserve Bank of India. So why it is known as monetary policy? Because it controls the money supply in the economy, and not only money supply, it also controls the supply of credit in the economy. So in some books, I don't know how it has been explained in your study material, the policy are the monetary policy is discussed. There are two types of policy. While the monetary policy is concerned with regulating supply of money, in some books you may find also a term called credit policy of the central bank. So credit policy is a more wider concept. It is a wider concept, and it also includes the monetary policy. So anyway, the monetary policy or credit policy, whatever you may call it, it is a policy which is formulated by the central bank of the country in order to control the money supply and the credit supply in the economy. And that is why it is very essential to understand the different forces which determine the supply of money and the supply of credit. We are discussing about the monetary policy. So the main objective there are two principal objectives of this monetary policy or credit policy, whatever you may call it. That is to check inflation or to maintain price stability in the economy, and to stimulate the economic growth of the country. So these are the two key objectives or basic objectives of the
Sir,
monetary
can you
policy.
repeat objectives once again?
It must be there in your study material under the heading economic environment of the business. You will check it. So I'm just telling you precisely. I'm telling you to explain the basic objectives of the monetary policy is two: to check inflation or the price rise, or you can say to maintain price stability in the economy. And second objective is to stimulate the growth of the economy, to stimulate economic growth and to maintain price stability. The monetary policy are implemented by the Reserve Bank of India. It is formulated and implemented by the Reserve Bank of India. So one of the most important, what are the different functions of the central bank of a country? You know that central bank of a country, it acts as the banker's bank. It acts as the banker to the government. Then it acts as the custodian of the foreign exchange reserve of our country. Central bank also has the power, monopoly power of note issue. These are the different functions of the Reserve Bank of India in our country, and these are the functions of the central bank in every country. And the another most important function, the most important function of the Reserve Bank of India is credit control. There are two techniques of credit control. One is quantitative techniques, the other one is qualitative techniques. With the help of quantitative techniques, the Reserve Bank of India controls and regulates the quantity of money supply in the economy. And quantity of money supply in the economy is controlled with the help of quantitative techniques. And the Reserve Bank of India has been given power under the provisions of the Reserve Bank of India Act of 1934 to exercise the quantitative techniques to control credit or to control the money supply in the economy. And the quantitative techniques are your discount rate policy, then VCR. VCR, what is the full form of VCR? Not video cassette recorder. In the context of monetary policy or in the context of central bank, what is the full form of VCR? Variable cash reserve ratio. Variable cash reserve ratio. So this ratio is a quantitative technique of credit control used by the Reserve Bank of India for what? For controlling the money supply in the economy. Variable cash reserve ratio, open market operations, discount rate policy, SLR, statutory liquidity ratio. These are the different quantitative techniques which are employed by the Reserve Bank of India in order to control credit, in order to control the money supply in the economy. So these are this quantitative techniques of credit control is also coming under something which is within the domain of the monetary policy. Then qualitative technique of credit control, it is these are the techniques which are employed by the Reserve Bank of India to control the direction of credit, flow of credit in a particular direction. This I was explaining you on the first day of my class. In the first class also I was telling you. You see, suppose the government as its national policy, suppose it wants that agriculture sector should develop or industrial sector should develop, then in that case what it will do? It will ask the Reserve Bank of India to not ask, it will communicate its national policy, so that Reserve Bank of India will influence through instructions and directives to the commercial banks in the country to direct more amount of credit to such sector, agriculture sector, industry sector, infrastructure sector. So that's why it is known as qualitative technique, with the help of which the Reserve Bank of India influences the flow of credit in a particular direction, either to the agricultural sector and to the priority sectors of the economy, those sectors which are given priority by the government as far as credit flow is concerned. So this is all about monetary policy. So precisely speaking, monetary policy means the policy which is meant for controlling the money supply and credit supply to the economy. Its main objective is to maintain price stability and to achieve economic growth, higher rate of economic growth. And monetary policy and credit policy are formulated by the Reserve Bank of India, the central bank of the country. Then fiscal policy. Fiscal policy refers to the policy of the government with regard to taxation, public expenditure, and public borrowing, keeping in mind certain specific objectives. That means in the budget, expenditure is allocated, fund is allocated for different heads, isn't it? Total amount of income, government is earning revenue from different sources. Of course, at present, the government is not earning any revenue. Government's earning in terms of revenue has reduced to minimum due to the ongoing crisis, COVID-19 and the lockdown. All the economic activities have almost come to a halt for almost last 2 to 3 months, as a result of which the government earning has been reduced to minimum. But government has some definite sources of earning revenue or income. These incomes are allocated to different heads. Government earns revenue through taxes, excise duty, indirect taxes, direct taxes. The government earns revenue. And these revenues are to be spent on different sectors of the economy in terms of priority, such as defense sector, education sector, health sector, agriculture sector, infrastructural development sector. So the public spending, with the help of fiscal policy, the government will decide with regard to the amount of expenditure which has to be incurred. So the policy with regard to taxation, what should be the rate of tax, what should be which product should be taxed more, which on which product less amount of tax should be levied, what should be the rate of tax, everything will be decided through the fiscal policy. And also it involves policy with regard to government spending and government borrowing. So why do government borrows? Government borrows for the purpose of promoting a particular sector of the economy. Suppose nowadays government requires huge amount of resources in order to provide, in order to be spent for the health sector. Government needs PPE equipments, government needs face masks, sanitizer, and it is also spending crores of rupees for uh, feeding those people who have been thrown out of their job due to this lockdown. It is spending crores of rupees. So all these expenditure, how they are to be made? They will be made through taxation. Government earns revenue by way of tax. So if that amount of tax will become insufficient, then there will be deficit. And in order to make up this deficit, the government will have to borrow. Take a very simple example in your family. Suppose your father is earning 10,000 rupees. Your father is earning 10,000 rupees per month. But suppose if your expenditure, total expenditure in the month will become 11,000 or 12,000, then how the deficit amount, the extra 2,000 rupees, how it can be compensated? It can be compensated through borrowing. Through borrowing. So exactly in the same way, the government has certain pre-decided sources of revenue, and it spends the revenue on different activities, different sectors of the economy, defense sector, education sector, agriculture sector, industry sector, health sector. And if there will be any deficiency, that deficiency has to be compensated through borrowing or by levying higher tax on the citizens, of the country. Are you paying taxes? Yes,
So,
you are paying. Surabhi Mathur, are you paying tax?
yes, I mean, my husband is paying.
You are not paying.
No, I am not earning, so I'm not paying.
No. Are you wearing shoe? You are wearing dresses. So when you are buying dresses, you are paying tax. When you
Yeah,
are
correct, yeah.
when
Yeah.
you are fueling your vehicle, scooter, then you are paying taxes. When you are buying your
Mm,
shoe, when you are going to a restaurant, you are paying taxes, isn't it?
yeah.
So
Yes.
those are the important source of revenue for the government. Those are indirect taxes. But the tax which you are paying on your income, on your earning, that is direct tax. But goods and service, suppose you are going to a restaurant, you are paying taxes. You are buying a pair of shoe, you are paying taxes. These are indirect taxes. GST, those are goods and service tax. But on the income, on the earning, you are paying taxes, and that is direct tax. So you must know, as a student of management or as a student of commerce, you should know the distinction between direct tax and indirect tax. So, exactly in the same way, when suppose your parents' income is 10,000 rupees, and if your parents are spending in a month more than 10,000 rupees, suppose 15,000 rupees, that extra 5,000 rupees they will have to borrow. So similarly, government has certain known sources of income, and those government also will have to spend money for different heads on different purposes. So if the spending will become more than the amount of income, then there will be deficit. The public expenditure, if the expenditure of the government becomes more than the government earning, then the deficit will be, there will be deficit, and that deficit is known as fiscal deficit. Excess of expenditure over income is known as fiscal deficit, and desirably it should not exceed 4% of the gross domestic product of a country. It should lie in it should be below 4%. So if there will be deficit, if there will be fiscal deficit, how that deficit can be made good? How that deficit will be compensated? Either through public borrowing or by levying higher taxes on the citizens, isn't it? So, in this way, fiscal policy refers to the policy of the government with regard to taxation, public expenditure, and public borrowing with specific objectives in view. Specific objectives means what for money will be borrowed and for what purpose the money will be spent. The purpose must be very clearly defined. It must be very clearly stated. So, what is the objective of the fiscal policy? The objective of the fiscal policy in developed countries like USA, UK, France, Russia, these are developed countries, and the objective of developed countries, objective of fiscal policy in developed country is to achieve economic stability, to strengthen the economy of their nations. Whereas in a developing country like ours, developing country like India, the objective of fiscal policy is to achieve economic growth with social justice. To achieve economic growth with social justice. And the economic growth can be achieved in two ways. In order to grow economically, we need economic resources. Which are those resources? In economics, we are told about 4 types of resources: land, labor, capital, and organization. So the economic growth can be achieved by mobilizing more amount of resources in the economy. In two ways economic growth can be achieved. Number one, by mobilizing greater resource or improving resource mobilization, or by increasing the efficiency of the existing resources, by increasing the or efficient resource allocation, isn't it? If you have not understood, let me explain it to you. Effectiveness and efficiency. You should know what is effectiveness. Means to secure a first class mark in your MCOM examination. If you have secured first class mark in your MCOM examination, 60% mark in your MCOM examination, then that will be called as effectiveness. Effective. Your study is effective. Your efforts have become effective. Suppose here two students are, and what is the meaning of efficiency? There are two students, I am telling their name, Surabhi Mathur and the another one, suppose Saraswati Sahu. Surabhi Mathur is studying for 6 hours a day, and she has achieved 60% mark in MCOM examination. And suppose Saraswati Sahu, she is working only 2 hours a day. She is studying only for 2 hours a day. And she has also secured 60% mark. Then in just for the sake of example, I am giving this, I am telling this. Don't take it seriously. So, who is more efficient?
Saraswati.
Because she has spent only 2 hours a day, whereas Surabhi is spending 6 hours a day. That means if you are using your resources optimally, with the same amount of resources, if you are getting the same output with the best use of resources, then you are efficient, isn't it? So, economic growth with the help of fiscal policy can be achieved in two ways: by improving the mobilization of resources or increasing the mobilization of resources. That is the first way. And the second way is to increase the efficiency of the allocation of resources. The resources, if they are put to their maximum use, optimum use, then also you can achieve economic growth. So this is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is formulated by the government. It is achieved, the fiscal policy, the objective of fiscal policy is to achieve economic stability and to promote economic growth. And it is the policy relating to taxation, public expenditure, and public borrowing, keeping certain specific objectives in view. And this is all about fiscal policy. So this is, today we have discussed about, let me put it in a nutshell, about the arbitration, then dimensions of social responsibility of business, then fiscal policy, monetary policy, credit policy. So I have told about all these things very precisely. It is there, it must have been explained in your study material in detail. So you go through your study material, prepare your note, and then you will be able to understand them properly. So tomorrow, if you are having any doubt anywhere on the topic that we have discussed so far, right from the beginning, you can ask me, so that we will discuss only on those points tomorrow. If you want further explanation or further deliberation on any topic relating to business environment, you just tell me, I will note it down so that I will discuss them tomorrow on those topics. Just 1 minute. I am coming within 1 minute. Hello.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
sir.
On which topic we will discuss tomorrow? You tell me, suggest me.
सर कल ही क्लास नहीं
नहीं छुट्टी.
ना सर आज्ञा
Oh, I see. Today is our last class.
यस सर
Let me
No,
talk.
so we have a class tomorrow also.
No, but sir is telling there is tomorrow.
Let
No, no.
me
सर नोटिस करछन्ते सर
No, but sir, just now, sir has mentioned in the
Let me
chat
talk
box
to
that
you.
tomorrow.
Hello, sir, you
Oh.
will be continuing the class tomorrow, sir.
Okay.
And day after tomorrow, MCO 5 will be started, and that with a new counselor.
So tomorrow is our last class.
Yes, sir, tomorrow. Because you
Okay.
need to take 6 classes, and today is your 5th one.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, learners, if you are if you want any further deliberation on any topic on business environment, you tell me so that I will note it down and we will discuss them elaborately tomorrow. Yes. Okay, then I will select
सर
some. हाँ.
रेपो रेट एंड रिजर्व रेपो रेट
Repo rate and reserve repo rate नहीं, reverse repo rate.
आज्ञा आज्ञा रिवर्स
Repo rate and reverse repo rate.
आज्ञा
Okay. Repo rate and reverse repo rate. Yes.
Excuse me,
Sir,
sir.
the FDI policy for
Sir,
foreign
label.
investors.
Foreign direct investment policy,
Yes, sir.
FDI.
Sir, labor legislation.
Labor legislation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Repo rate, reverse repo rate, FDI policy, labor legislation. Labor legislation is a very vast topic. Any specific point you want to know, or okay, we will discuss. Anything else?
Sir, the EXIM policy also, if you could just brief it out.
Pardon?
The EXIM, EXIM.
EXIM policy, export import policy.
Yes, sir.
Export import policy, you must have
Yeah, sir,
studied
we read, studied like last
in
year
IBO.
also.
In IBO,
Yeah.
last year you must have gone through them.
Yeah, and sir, actually we have this thing also, balance of payment also we have done, but just because last year I was not able to attend the classes, and I am like a science student. So just I wanted, sir, just like
You
the
want to
overview of
have
you.
some basic idea about EXIM policy,
Yeah, yeah,
balance of payment.
yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Have you started writing, all of you, your assignments? Home assignment?
यस
Yes,
सर
sir.
आई हैव डिपॉजिटेड
Okay. And those who have taken, who have registered afresh in the second year, you start writing your home assignment. The questions must be available in the net by this time. And if you will write the assignment leisurely, it will be easier for you to not only to understand the subject properly, but also your assignment will be better. And you will be able to write your assignment properly, and it is a kind of warming up for your final term ending examination. Isn't it? If you will prepare your assignment properly, home assignment, it is a kind of warming up exercise for your term ending examination. So that's why you should start writing at least one question from each subject with regard to your home assignment, because you have also to prepare yourself for other subjects, isn't it? Huh. So that's why you should write one question at least in a week, one question from each subject. Okay, we will meet tomorrow.
Sir,
Huh.
sir, one question. TRIMS, trade-related investment measures.
So is it from business environment?
This to be studied last year.
You see,
Yeah.
those materials I will have to refer to the books, and I don't have
Yes,
study
sir.
material unless I have study material, because I am not teaching international business environment.
Okay, sir.
So even this subject is also new for me. I am basically a teacher of accounting, management, then finance, and
Okay,
your
sir.
marketing. So that's why unless I get the study material, it will be difficult for me. Anyway, still I will try. Which topic you want to?
Sir, book 5,
No, what is the topic?
Unit 19,
No, what is the
globalization and WTO.
globalization and WTO?
Again.
It must be there in your international business environment,
Yes, sir.
IBO. Okay. Okay. Let us end the meeting, end the class. Bye.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.